No, it's not, because language acquisition is natural. You don't have to be smart to acquire a language. People of almost all intelligence levels, whether they're mentally retarded up to geniuses, can learn language. It just depends on how, with the retardation, it depends on what kind that you have. Yes, if you may make a comment.
I was just going to mention that there was a study done by a gentleman in the 1970s on what types of grammar we learn first. And apparently the one that we teach or try to teach elementary students, which is subject-verb agreement, is actually one of the last things that a student will pick up if they're learning, if they're acquiring language in a natural way. So we get it the wrong way around when we teach them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there are studies I've seen that are done that show in each language which features are picked up first. And you just reminded me, if that's absolutely right, that a lot of times whenever we're teaching adults language, we teach them things that are actually harder to master up front, and they might get discouraged whenever, if we maybe were paid more attention to the natural way that we acquire language, we could teach them things that are simpler to acquire so they can build on those easier. So IFF, brilliant, very good. Another thing I wanted to point out is that language acquisition is not linear. I think this is so crucial. Students often show progress on a concept. So they'll learn something, they'll be using adjectives in all the right places, in all the right ways one week, and then the next week, suddenly it's just not there, and they're putting adjectives in the wrong place, or all of a sudden they're confusing them with adverbs, and maybe they'll get discouraged. Last week I had it, now I don't. Well, long-term studies show that when you're acquiring a language, you will make a lot of progress. Then you'll have a regression where it will seem like you've forgotten things. And soon after, though, you have mastery. And so for whatever reason, that's the way that your brain works. It makes progress, then it kind of chills out on it, and it may seem like, oh, I've forgotten it. You have not actually forgotten it. It's just your brain acquiring language in the way that it does. And I don't know why it does it that way, and it is discouraging. But if we know this as teachers, we can tell our students, hey, don't worry about it. That's what everyone does. That's part of language learning. Just wait. This is a good sign. It means you're on the road, and you will be mastering that concept before you know it. So we need to make sure that our students don't get discouraged. Because I think, like I said, language acquisition is normal, or it is natural, but we need to make sure our students continue to work so that they will continue to have the exposure. And this one, obviously, students say, I'm too old to learn a new language. I'll never be perfect. So, obviously, is there an age limit to language acquisition?
Perhaps. I mean, or maybe not so much language acquisition, but on a general level, I just find my memory is deteriorating. And so I suppose it's not so much about intellectual ability, but more about, yes, a cellular damage as you get older.
Yeah, well, that's
That
really
sounds like you've put yourself through some paces, Ifaf. Cellular damage.
Hey.
What have you been doing?
Exactly.
I know that feeling, yeah.
Not say that here.
Well, I've noticed, maybe not our students here, but students that I've encountered before have said, I'm too old. I'll never be native-like. That's another thing. I'll never be native. I'll always have an accent. Well, yeah, they probably will always have an accent, but as you'll see, I say, what's wrong with an accent? So, but you actually are never too old to acquire a new language. There is a critical period, okay? People under the age of 12 have it a lot easier than we do. Their brain is in that language acquisition mode. They are sucking language up like a sponge, and especially with pronunciation, to have a native, to easily acquire a native accent, honestly, you need to be a child when you start to learn, because the muscles are getting, in all the right places, and you're learning those points of articulation, you're learning exactly where to place your tongue, and you're more flexible. But as you know, with some actors, you can practice on your accent to death, but I think that's kind of a waste of time. But the good thing is, though, even though it is more difficult for adults, it takes longer for us to learn language, we actually retain what we have learned longer than children. They did short-term studies where children lived abroad or adults lived abroad and were learning language. in a native in a study abroad kind of context. And when the children return to their native the places of origin, they quickly forgot the language they had learned. The adults, however, retained the language they had learned and it was much easier for them to pick it back up. And so you can tell your students, yes, children learn more easily. They're going to learn more quickly. However, as an adult, you're going to keep what you learned a lot longer. It's going to be easier for you to get that back. And oh yes, I am going to talk about experiential learning and attaching meaning to language, because I think that's super, super crucial. So yeah, it's a good point. Maybe adults, I really think it has to do with how your brain is, the way that you acquire things and the way that your brain is wired at the moment. Oops. Okay, so some other factors that contribute to problems with adult language acquisition is most adults just don't have the free time that children do to practice language. They're busy working or doing other things. They don't have as much free time. And most adults are more self-conscious of errors and so take fewer risks in language. So children make mistakes in language and people laugh, oh, it's cute, or they don't have a problem. And so adults, however, a lot of times are more self-conscious. They're afraid of making a mistake. And so I say you should tell your students, be easy on yourself. You're learning. A mistake is not the end of the world, and it doesn't mean that you're stupid. Everyone makes mistakes. Even native speakers make mistakes in language. It is not a big deal. And I think that it actually, I read a study that showed that people who had a more risk-taking attitude in life, who were a little bit more spontaneous and unafraid of risks, acquired language more quickly than those who were more reserved and more afraid of risks. And I think it's because with the personality, if you're not afraid to look bad or to make a mistake, you're more likely to put yourself out there and to really get involved with the language, and so you will learn more quickly. And lastly, on this slide, does being native-like and having no accent really matter? No. I don't think it does, and there's a lot of obsession I've noticed with language learners. They want to sound native, they want to be perfect, but as long as they're understandable and their accent is not keeping them from being understood, then it shouldn't matter if you sound like you're from London or if you sound like you're from wherever you want to sound like you're from. It just matters that you're able to communicate. And like Gertie just commented in the local chat, I also love an accent, and I tell them, why would you want to lose that sexy accent? Like, that's a way to flirt, you know? Accents are also part of your identity. And so tell them, why would, the fact that you have an accent should be part of your identity. You should be proud of that and your heritage. And it shows, I think having an accent shows how educated you are. Because if you're able to speak another language, wow, isn't that something to brag about? And so an accent is almost like a way to brag, hey, I know how to speak another language.